All right, let's dive into something really cool today. We're going to unpack one of the most brilliant fictional papers I've ever read, the Cognitive Physics Trilogy. It puts forward this wild idea, a totally new way to look at the mind, not as some big mystery, but as a system that follows actual predictable physical laws. And the paper kicks off with this massive question, one that really gets right to the heart of what it's all about. What if we could actually know, with real scientific confidence, the exact breaking point of any thinking system? We're talking about a person, an AI, maybe even an entire society. So, how do you even begin to answer that? Well, the authors propose a whole new field of study they call cognitive physics. And the core idea is pretty simple but profound. Stop treating thoughts and beliefs as something magical or mystical and start treating them like, well, like physics, a system with forces and pressures and structures that we can actually measure. What this really means is they're trying to create a kind of user manual for the mind. It all boils down to a few key ingredients. You've got coherence, which is basically how well all your beliefs stick together. Then there's entropy, which is just mental chaos. And finally, resonance, that tendency to amplify ideas you already agree with. The cool part is this model could work for any system that thinks. The whole trilogy is built on these three massive pillars, and they're going to be our roadmap for today. First, how do you even diagnose the health of a belief system? Second, what keeps a healthy mind from falling apart? And third, the big one, what are the precise conditions that cause a complete and total collapse?
So let's start with that first pillar, diagnosis. How can you tell if a really complex, organized set of beliefs, say a deep-seated conspiracy theory, is actually connected to reality, or if it's just a very convincing illusion? Well, the paper proposes a pretty ingenious test.
It's called the Perturbation response test. And honestly, the best way to think about it is like tapping a crystal glass. A system with true coherence, one that's grounded in reality, it'll ring. It might wobble a bit when you challenge it with new facts, but then it settles down, maybe even stronger than before. But a system with false coherence, it does one of two things. It either just completely rejects the new information, becoming even more rigid, or it just shatters into a million chaotic pieces. Okay, that's a cool idea, but it immediately raises a big question, right? If you're going to test a mind's connection to reality, how do you put a number on that? How do you actually measure it? And this is where it gets really clever. The paper introduces this key metric, the reality coupling constant, or as they call it, lambda r. You can just think of it as a score, a single number that tells you how plugged into the real world a belief system actually is.
And the score is super easy to understand. If it's positive, you're truth-aligned. That means you're actively learning from the world around you. If your score is 0, you're isolated. You're basically living in a bubble, an echo chamber. But a negative score, well, that's when you're in a delusional state, where you're actively fighting reality to protect your own beliefs.
So, when you put these two ideas together, your coherence and your reality coupling, you get this amazing cognitive phase map. It's like 4 different states of mind. The place you want to be is the top right, resonant truth. Your beliefs are strong, and they're backed by reality. The most dangerous spot is the top left, rigid illusion. That's a perfectly organized echo chamber. Down in the bottom right is the seeker zone. You're open-minded and learning, but your beliefs haven't solidified yet. And finally, the bottom left. That's the collapse basin, the state where everything has just fallen apart.
Okay, so if that's how we can diagnose a mind, how do healthy minds manage to stay out of that collapse basin? This brings us to the second pillar, the machinery that's actively working all the time to keep our minds from flying off the rails. The key idea here is something they call identity gravity. It's such a great metaphor, right? Just like gravity pulls a planet towards the sun, this cognitive force is always pulling your thoughts and beliefs back to a stable core sense of self. It's that invisible thing that makes you wake up every day and still feel like you. So this internal coherence engine, which is powered by identity gravity, is basically your mind's chief of security. It's constantly fighting against all the ways a mind can go wrong. It stops you from getting sucked into a runaway echo chamber, it prevents your sense of self from shattering into pieces, and it even protects you from just being so overloaded with information that your thinking shuts down, which the paper calls brilliantly thermal cognitive death. And all of this leads us to the dramatic final act of the trilogy. If we understand what holds a mind together, can we use that knowledge to predict the exact moment it's going to break? This is where they introduce the law of cognitive collapse. So what is it? What's the final straw? What's that tipping point where all those stabilizing forces just get overwhelmed and the whole system just gives way? Well, the answer comes down to this constant battle that's playing out inside every mind. On one side, you have the good guys, the restoring forces, F+, that's your connection to reality and your stable sense of self. And on the other side, you have the eroding forces, F-, that's mental chaos or entropy and the dangerous pull of echo chambers. It is a constant tug of war.
And here it is. The collapse law is almost shockingly simple. Breakdown happens the very moment that the eroding forces become stronger than the restoring forces. That's it. That's the tipping point. When F- finally overtakes F+, collapse isn't just possible, it's inevitable. And because this is framed as a physical law, it means it comes with predictable warning signs. Think of them like the check engine lights for a cognitive system. Your reality coupling score starts to drop, you find yourself getting really touchy about small challenges to your beliefs, chaos starts to build up, your sense of self, that identity gravity, feels weaker. These aren't just vague feelings. In this model, there are measurable signals that a system is getting dangerously close to its breaking point.
Now, this has all been a fascinating trip through a fictional theory, but let's get down to it. So what? Why does a framework like this actually matter out here in the real world?
I think this quote from the paper just nails it. The real power of cognitive physics is how broad it is. These laws aren't just for individual human brains. The idea is that they could apply to anything that thinks. An advanced AI, the internal culture of a massive company, maybe even the political polarization of an entire country. Suddenly, this framework gives us a whole new language to talk about some of our biggest, thorniest problems. How do we make sure AI is safe? Well, we need to build it with a strong identity gravity and a positive reality coupling score. How do we understand political division? You can see it as a system with dangerously low reality coupling and runaway resonance. It's like a diagnostic toolkit for the health of any thinking system. At the end of the day, what the Cognitive Physics Trilogy really gives us is one single unified framework to understand how any mind holds itself together and the very specific reasons why it might fall apart. And that leaves us with a final and pretty profound question to chew on. If the fundamental laws that govern our thinking are actually knowable, just like the laws of gravity or thermodynamics, what does that mean for us? What's our responsibility to use that knowledge to build healthier minds, safer technologies, and maybe even more sane societies?